So today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the other two operations with integers. We're going to look at multiply and divide. So last time we combined, and remember combine means either add or subtract. Think of it as combined because you're combining depending on the signs. And now we're going to multiply or divide. Well, the operations of multiplication or division don't change. You're always, if it's a multiply, you're going to multiply the numbers. If it's divide, you're going to divide them. But we still have to understand how to get the sign of our answer. What sign is the answer going to be? So this time, we're not going to change the operation, right? So if you see multiplication, it's always multiplication. But you do need to concentrate on what the sign is. So we're going to give you two rules for that. Now here's where it goes south. They look almost identical to the rules for combining, but they behave completely differently for the rules from combining. So you've got to make sure that before you start doing anything, the first thing you do is ask myself what operation is indicated. Because you have to know the operation in order to know the proper rule to use. Okay? You also need to make sure that you learn all four rules and their operations. Okay? And never say one rule without its operation. So here we go. To multiply or divide integers. Again, we're lumping the operations together. You'll know when it's multiply and you'll know when it's divide. That's not the hard part. The hard part is determining the sign. First off, if the signs are the same, so both of the numbers you're working with are either both positive or both negative. The signs are the same. So just like last time, same exact start off to the sentence. The answer is always positive. So there's where it's different. Okay? So if the signs are the same, the answer is always a positive. So let's look at a few examples of that. Say I have -2 times a -6. Well, first of all, what operation is indicated here? Multiplication. And we're multiplying with integers, and I can tell that because I see some minuses in front of them. So, what's the sign of the 2? Negative. What's the sign of the 6? Negative. So are the signs the same or different? If the signs are the same and I'm multiplying, the answer is always going to be a what? A positive. And this is where that famous 2 negatives make a positive comes from, and I will not be happy if I ever hear you say it, because it's not true. A negative times a negative becomes a positive, right? That's not the same thing as saying 2 negatives make a positive. You have to say the operation symbol in there as well. Okay? And of course, then we're just going to multiply, just like always. 2 times 6 is still what? 12. That's not ever going to change. Okay? So when you're multiplying or dividing, your job is to determine the sign first. Do it first. Second, let's do a division one. Say I have -6 over -2. What operation is indicated by the fraction bar? Division. There you go. What's the sign of the 6? What's the sign of the 2? And a negative divided by another negative is always a... And then, of course, 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, remember the fraction bar always means divide. Okay? So be careful. Even if you can't divide the numbers, you still have to work with the signs. What operation is indicated by the fraction bar? Divide. A negative divided by a negative becomes a positive. And can I divide a 4 by a 5? Nope. So it just stays 4 over 5. So even though you couldn't divide the numbers, you still had to work with the signs. Right? Okay, so be careful about it. All right. So the second rule says that if the signs are different, The answer is always, what do you think? Negative. There you go. Okay. So if the signs are different and you're multiplying or dividing, again, make sure the operation is the most important thing you can do. Identify that operation. Then if the signs are different, then the answer is always going to be a negative, no matter what the numbers are, right? So it's not keep the sign of the larger. You're just going to always make a negative out of them. Okay. So let's look at a couple of examples of that. So we have negative 2 times a 3. What operation is indicated? That should always be your first question. What operation is indicated there? Multiplication. So before I multiply, I'm going to determine the sign first. What's the sign of the 2? What's the sign of the 3? How do you know it's positive? It doesn't have a plus in front of it. If it doesn't have a negative, then you have to assume it's a positive, right? Good job. So a negative times a positive is always going to be a negative because the signs are different, okay? And of course, 2 times 3 is 6. When you're doing division, negative 12 divided by positive 2. Negative divided by a positive is going to be a negative. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Okay? Even if you can't do the division, you still have to do the sign. What operation is indicated by the fraction bar? Divide. Positive divided by a negative is a negative because the signs are different. And can I divide 3 by 5? Nope. So it just stays 3 over 5. So in other words, it just makes the entire fraction negative. So a positive divided by a negative, signs are different, so the answer is going to be a negative. Even if you can't divide the numbers, we still have to obey the sign rules. Okay? So always walk through the process. First, most important thing you can ever do is identify the operation. If you don't know what operation you have, you don't know how to do the problem. Second, obey the appropriate sign rule for that operation. Right? Then work with the numbers. Right? So always do the sign first. Now what you're going to see is with a lot of books and a lot of worksheets and things that you see online, you're going to see that they work on the numbers, then they go back and do the sign second. That is the worst possible thing that you could do. Because most of you are fine with 2 times 3, right? Where do you think you're going to make your mistakes? With the signs. So if it's the signs that you're making mistakes on, then determine the sign first. If you get the sign out of the way, then you don't worry about it, right? Does it make sense? So always do the sign first. That's why I always put the sign rules with the sign first, then the mathematics second. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our snowflake and we're going to look at a few examples of this, work through some problems, and then I'm going to set you loose on your homework, okay? So here we go. Now, I do want to remind you guys, because I did get several comments from parents on Monday and Wednesday that you don't seem to have any homework. I don't have any homework. That's baloney, is it not? What is your homework? Always. It's always the same homework, always. Study your notes. Exactly. All right, study your notes. You should be doing that every chance you get. You don't know something unless you can tell me how to do it, right? So study. So I told them how to make some flashcards and do all kinds of fun things. Get ready. All right.